Dear Steve, thank you for your years of service. You're no longer aligned with our vision. That was it. After 18 years, a thank you letter dressed up in corporate disdain. My name is Steve Ellis. I'm 48 years old. I spent nearly 2 decades as the Director of Infrastructure at Orion Global Tech, based in Austin. I built every layer of that network, every security protocol. I kept the systems running through 3 blackouts, 2 mergers, and more layoffs than I can count. I never showed up in company town halls, never asked for recognition. I just got the job done. They used to call me the guy in the basement, but everyone knew. If something broke, I was the one they called. I wasn't visible, but I was vital. Craig Benson showed up just 9 months ago. Young, Harvard MBA, TED Talk energy, and that Silicon Valley investor grin. At 38, he stepped into the CEO role like it was his birthright. Came in talking about cutting the fat and doubling the valuation. Always had some consultant in tow and threw around words like pivot, automate, and outsource. Never once looked me in the eye. Steve is part of the old Orion, he said in a meeting once. I heard him, pretended I didn't, but he'd already made up his mind. Craig thought he was pushing me off the board. What he didn't know, what no one there knew, was that I knew about the company's dirty secrets. The letter showed up on a Tuesday. No warning, no meeting. Just there, sitting on my desk like an invitation to step out of my own story. No one called me in. No one said a word. Just an envelope. Inside, a letter signed by Craig and the head of HR. Thank you for your years of dedication. Unfortunately, at this stage, you're no longer aligned with our vision for the future. I read it 3 times, looked around. The office was empty. It felt like everyone already knew I didn't belong there anymore. I stood up and went straight to HR. Susan, the HR manager, greeted me with a strained, uncomfortable smile. Hey, Steve. Yeah. We figured you'd come by. Are you serious right now? She looked down. This was a decision made by the executive board. It's not about your performance. It's part of a strategic restructuring. Then why was my access revoked before we even had this conversation? That's standard protocol. Information security. You understand, right? More than you people realize. She handed me a sheet with instructions, return badge, laptop, and signed the termination agreement. I signed the papers in silence, went back to my office, sat in my swivel chair, and stared at the open email on the other screen. A company-wide message sent to all leadership. We are entering a new phase of innovation and efficiency. We're grateful for those who've contributed thus far. No names, no faces, just a corporate footnote. I was part of a quiet purge, and no one said a word. Craig didn't even have the decency to show up. But I remembered the last time he passed me in the hallway. Rushed look, that smug smile. Steve, we need to talk soon about the IT reports. There are a few inconsistencies I'd like to understand. That conversation never happened. Now I knew why. I started packing up my things. A photo of my daughter at her graduation. A silly Employee of the Quarter trophy from 2009. The Swiss Army knife a coworker gave me when he retired. Every item had a story. And every story now felt like it had been pushed out by some cost-cutting algorithm. Even so, as I boxed it all up, my mind kept drifting back to one specific folder. One I'd saved almost 2 years ago, after I noticed some unusual activity in the company's software licensing. At the time, I flagged it to my direct manager. He said, "Let the execs handle it. It's not our place." But I made a backup. I always did. In the months that followed, vendor contracts started ballooning in cost without any clear explanation. Some of the company names were ones I'd never seen before. And the system started becoming less and less transparent. I did what I always did. Saved everything, cataloged it, and waited. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. Now sitting outside the building with the box in my lap, I knew. This wasn't about cost cutting. It was about erasing traces. And the most interesting part? The name of the main outsourced company suddenly receiving millions was the same as an old colleague of Craig's, back from when he was just another analyst. Orion was rotten on the inside, and they thought that by cutting me loose, the truth would vanish with me. But they forgot one simple thing. I still had the keys. The next morning, I sat down at my desk at home, opened my external drive, and searched for that folder. When I saw what was in there, it all clicked. They knew I knew. And that's why they silenced me. The next morning, the house was too quiet. I woke up at the same time as always, no alarm. No urgent emails, no team messages. The routine that had shaped my life for nearly 2 decades had vanished like it never existed. All that remained was the empty stretch of forced free time. In the kitchen, I made coffee slowly, like the sound of the machine might somehow fill the space left behind. Lisa, my wife, showed up in the doorway still in her robe. She looked at me with a kind of quiet care. "Want to talk?" I shook my head. "Later." She got it. She always has. In my home office, the morning light hit the bookshelf, the same shelf where, years ago, I used to store binders and manuals for obsolete servers that only I still knew how to keep alive. I sat down, booted up my personal computer, and finally opened the folder. Orion, Audit Private, inside spreadsheets, access logs, screenshots of e-contracts, and a report I had put together myself a year and a half ago when I noticed a strange pattern in IT purchases. Vendors with generic names, contracts being renewed ahead of schedule, payments split into multiple entries each just below the auto-approval threshold. An old trick. Still works. And buried in the middle of it all, a spreadsheet with one name. Lighthouse Solutions LLC. A company no one had ever explained to me, but it kept showing up tied to software renewals. I typed the name into my browser. Result: a registered office in a Miami co-working space. No website, no working phone number. I went back to the spreadsheet. There it was, the digital signature approving the contract, Craig Benson. I closed my eyes. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. I spent the entire morning digging through everything I'd archived over the years. Old emails, recorded meetings, documents nobody even remembered existed. Most of it looked harmless until I started matching the dates. The day the company announced budget cuts for the development team, a contract with Lighthouse was extended by $400,000, almost to the minute. Craig had pitched it all as economies of scale. It was starting to look like he was using the company as a bridge for something bigger or dirtier. And now, it all made sense. Why my name had quietly disappeared from the meeting invites. Why the projects I was leading were suddenly frozen. Why no one had asked for my risk assessments in months. I was a problem, and I needed to be removed before I started connecting the dots. Lisa appeared at the office door. "You okay?" Better than they'd like. She didn't ask anything else, just brought me a sandwich like she used to on my most stressful work days. I turned back to the computer, created a new folder. Name: Orion, Defense. This wasn't going to be a legal fight. It would be something else. Something quiet. Built with precision. But first, I needed to confirm one last thing. Whether this was just a dirty scheme buried in spreadsheets, or if someone higher up was in on it. That afternoon, I got an unexpected message. A former CFO from Orion wanted to talk, and he said just one sentence. "Steve, I think we have the same enemy." The message came by email. Subject line: "Off the record." It was from Richard Tolland, Orion's former chief financial officer he'd left almost 2 years ago quietly. The body of the email was brief. "Steve, I know what you found. We need to talk. I have files, but we need to be careful. They've been monitoring internal activity since January." At the bottom, a phone number. I knew Richard. Honest guy. Always meticulous. Officially, he was let go over strategic vision differences. But now it was obvious. He saw what I saw. And that's why they got rid of him too. I waited until late afternoon. Called from an untraceable number, routed through a VPN. His voice came through steady but quiet, like he was speaking from somewhere you shouldn't raise your voice. "Steve, I didn't think you'd actually call. Just needed to make sure it was really you. Lighthouse Solutions. That's just the tip. Silence. You got documents? I've got emails, spreadsheets, and a recording Craig and the board in a meeting. They knew. You safe? As long as I don't push too hard. But if we team up, we might be able to shift the whole game." I hung up and sat there staring at the black screen of my phone. I had an ally, someone who'd been on the inside. But more than that, now I knew Craig wasn't acting alone. I went back to my office, opened the defense folder and started reorganizing the files, sorting by date, by subject, by who was involved. I added the names of executives who had signed off on approvals that used to come through my department, built a timeline, and there it was, laid out in front of me like a map, a continuous, subtle scheme, spread across departments and shielded by very carefully bought silence. Over dinner, Lisa didn't say much, but as we cleared the plates, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're going to do something about this, aren't you?" I nodded. "But on my terms." She gave a half smile. "Then it'll work." That night I dreamed of Orion's server room, that steady blue light, the precisely routed cables, the protocols I had personally designed to protect the company. Now those same protocols were protecting the very criminals behind those walls. The next morning, I made an encrypted copy of everything, stored it in 2 separate locations, one of them away from my home. I started writing down questions. Who authorized this? Who benefited? And most importantly, who had the most to lose if someone tried to expose it? A few hours later, I got another call. It was Donovan, a former teammate still working at Orion. "Steve, word is you've been digging through old files." "Who told you that?" "Let's just say, not everyone in there trusts Craig." Pause. "There's something you need to see, but I can't send it over email." "Where and when?" "Tonight. Parking lot of the old East Division building. I'll be there." I hung up and felt something I hadn't since before I was let go. Strategy. That night, sitting in a parked car with the engine off, Donovan handed me a flash drive. "This never left the internal network, but now it's your problem." When I opened the file, I knew my time at Orion wasn't over yet. The file Donovan gave me that night was small, but the contents were anything but simple. 3 folders. 2 with modified contracts and 1 with internal access logs, entries, and exits from the payment approval systems. 1 line stood out. Access override. CFO, restricted finance system. Lighthouse batch 8. Date, 2 weeks before I was fired. The batch approval system was restricted to 3 people. I was one of them. Craig had revoked my access, and someone had bypassed the system. No protocol, no traceable path. In other words, this was planned. From the beginning, I had been the final technical roadblock between them and a full wipe of the trail. I didn't sleep that night. I grabbed an old notebook and started writing by hand names, dates, connections. I didn't want everything stored in one digital place. This kind of war isn't one with clicks, it's one with physical evidence and time. At sunrise, I drove out to a print shop outside the city, made hard copies of everything, came back with a thick sealed envelope, and placed it inside a metal box in my sister's basement. She didn't ask questions, just said, "If this disappears, who do I give it to?" "Mr. Randall on the board. He knows who I am." I drove back home and opened a secure channel on a foreign server. Uploaded part of the files there, protected with a split encryption key divided into 3 parts. 1 stayed with me. I sent the 2nd to Richard. The 3rd, I sealed in an envelope addressed to an old university professor with a note, "Open only if I disappear." After that, I logged into LinkedIn, low profile but active. Updated my bio with just 1 line. Former infrastructure director, still protecting systems. Within 24 hours, 3 former colleagues messaged me privately. 2 wanted to talk off the record. Meanwhile, Richard called. Confirmed. Lighthouse is tied to a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. And guess what? Craig? Not directly. But the primary shareholder of that holding co-founded a payment startup with him. They appeared together at a conference in 2019. More than suspicious. It was a link, and I decided to dig deeper. I pulled out my old audit hard drive, the one I used back in 2015 during a security incident. It held logs no one else had, and there it was. In October, Craig had requested a retroactive deletion of administrative logs. Request denied by me. Days later, I was removed from the validation chain. Their plan had been in motion for months. I was just the final step, eliminate the one technical obstacle who could unravel everything. By the end of that week, I had a printed dossier full of evidence, encrypted backups stored in 3 separate locations, secure communication lines with key people, proof of contract manipulation, and most importantly, the calm of someone who knows exactly what they're holding. But there was still one missing piece. Someone on the inside in direct contact with the board. Someone who could confirm whether the Orion leadership was being misled, or if they were in on it. That's when I got the anonymous email. No subject, no signature, just 1 line. "If you know how to use this, you can take them all down." I'm in. but never say my name. The anonymous email stayed open on my screen for several long minutes. Every word carried weight. If you know how to use this, you can take them all down. I'm in, but never say my name. This wasn't a bluff. The sender had used an internal channel, a corporate VPN, only accessible by someone still active at Orion, and not just any employee. The email had been signed with a code I personally created years ago, used for high-priority emergency access. Someone at the top. I replied cautiously, using an encrypted auto-response script. I trust you. Send what you have. No one will know. 4 hours later, I received a temporary download link. Inside the zipped file, 3 documents. The first, a spreadsheet of suspicious transactions, sequential payments, each just under the internal audit threshold. The second, an internal email between Craig and someone named N. Lang, discussing the cost-benefit of eliminating human redundancy in the infrastructure division. And the third, the most damning of all, a confidential legal department report warning of possible external investigations tied to financial activity involving Lighthouse Solutions. The board knew, or at the very least, they had been warned, and they chose silence. That same afternoon, Richard called me. We need to meet. Now. We met at a quiet cafe. Steve, I've got something that changes everything. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, covering it with his hand. Recording of the final meeting before your termination. Craig, 2 board members, and the company's legal counsel. How did you record this? Digital security. A bug in the video conferencing system that was never patched. I recorded it to protect myself. But now, I think it belongs to you more than me. I listened to the recording that same night. Craig's voice calm, calculated. Steve's a risk. Too much access, too much history, and way too much of a moral compass. If he figures out what we're doing, he'll interfere. We need to remove him before the Novaris merger. Another executive responded, Do we have legal ground for that? And the lawyer, As long as we don't make direct accusations, we can cite strategic misalignment. I've already drafted the letter. Merger with Novaris. That's what this was really about. It wasn't just corruption. It was a cover-up designed to secure a billion-dollar deal. And there it was, the catalyst. If the merger went through, everything would be lost. Evidence buried, names cleared, and Craig would walk away with a bonus and a glowing reputation. That was what I had to stop. The next day, I used my secure channel and sent a warning directly to Novaris's compliance department under a false identity. Before finalizing any merger with Orion, review contracts involving Lighthouse Solutions. There are hidden liabilities. No attachments, no specifics, just enough to trigger fear. By late afternoon, I got a response not from Novaris officially, but from a private number. Steve Ellis? Who's this? I represent Novaris. You sent a warning. We need to talk. Today. Absolute discretion. We met at a quiet hotel downtown. They showed up with 2 lawyers and an auditor. They listened to everything, took notes on everything, and at the end, the auditor looked me in the eye and said, If this checks out, this merger is dead. And so is Craig Benson. 3 days later, Novaris released a public statement. Merger suspended indefinitely. The next morning, Craig called me for the first time since my firing. He didn't wait for me to pick up. Just left a message. What did you do, Steve? His voice on the voicemail sounded different. Gone was the confident Craig, the polished executive who used to dominate meetings with empty words. This voice was tense. Almost afraid. What did you do, Steve? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By now he knew the Novaris deal hadn't fallen apart by chance. Over the 3 days prior, I had delivered the full dossier to Novaris's governance team through a secure channel. Everything. The hidden payments, the Lighthouse Solutions contracts, the recording where he described my termination as a preventative removal. They investigated, they confirmed, and before the final merger meeting, they pulled the plug. Craig tried to control the narrative. An internal email started circulating at Orion. The merger with Novaris has been delayed due to technical reasons. Our leadership remains committed to transparency and sustainable growth. A lie. And people were starting to notice. A few reached out to me off the record. Donovan sent just one sentence. The castle's starting to crack. The next morning, Richard called. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Someone leaked the internal documents. It's blowing up from the inside. Was it you? No, someone on the inside. And now they want to know who else knew. I knew what was coming. By late afternoon, I received an official email. Sender, Orion Board of Directors. Subject, private meeting request. Confidential. They asked me to appear at the company's headquarters as an external consultant for clarification on received documents. I replied calmly, available by video call. Prefer to record the conversation. They agreed. On the call, familiar faces now quiet. The chairman of the board thanked me for my ethical stance. They asked for details, asked for dates. I gave them everything accurately. No embellishment, no bitterness. At the end, the chairman asked, "If this is all confirmed, what do you want, Steve?" I didn't hesitate. Nothing. Pause. I'm not after a position. I'm not after revenge. I just want the truth. And for it not to be buried again. He nodded, solemn. We owe you an apology. I ended the call. I sat in silence. No smile. No sense of triumph. Just the weight of it all finally settling. Hours later, Craig called again. This time I answered. "Steve, can we talk?" "We're talking." "Look, things got out of hand, but we can still work this out. I have the authority to propose a deal, something that works in your favor." "What kind of deal?" "External consulting, 6-figure contract, full confidentiality. You win big, the company regains stability, and we put this all behind us, no more damage." I held back my answer for a moment. The board wants to move on, and so do I. I took a deep breath. He wasn't offering peace. He was trying to buy silence. Then I said, "You never got it, Craig. This was never about the money. It was about what you tried to bury, and what you thought no one would have the courage to expose." He tried one more time. "Steve, think this through. You could win without putting yourself out there. Close this chapter on top. I already won. And I didn't have to hide a thing." I hung up. The next morning, Orion announced Craig Benson's voluntary departure, but the strangest thing was the silence that followed. No celebration, no internal memo. The company was mourning what it had allowed to happen. And me? I was ready to decide what to do with the offer that had just come in from a competitor. 2 days after Craig's fall, I got an email from Orion. Subject, offer to return. It was formal, direct, almost impersonal, but the message said everything. "Mr. Ellis, in light of recent events and your pivotal contribution to Orion's integrity, we would like to invite you to return in an executive capacity, with direct access to the board, independent budget authority, and your own team. We believe your leadership can help rebuild what was lost." I read the email 3 times. I didn't feel relief or pride. I felt doubt. Lisa watched me from across the room. "Is that what you wanted?" I shook my head. "It's what they think I wanted." She walked over. "Do you want to go back?" I hesitated, then answered, "I want them to know what they lost. But going back," I closed the laptop and stepped out for a walk. The neighborhood streets were quiet, like they always were on Tuesdays, but in my head everything was pulsing. Going back would mean facing the same people who turned their backs, walking the same hallways where I'd been ignored, drinking coffee from the same machines that once fueled those who tried to erase me. Late in the afternoon, I went to my old file cabinet, pulled out a folder labeled 2005, Beginning. Inside were my first contracts, early project drafts, even the original network proposal I submitted when I first joined Orion. I stared at my signature from nearly 20 years ago. Stronger, more naive, but still me. I went back to the computer and wrote an email, addressed to the board, short, direct. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm declining the return. The truth has been exposed, and that's enough. I won't go back to a place that once discarded me for convenience." Sent, and I closed the laptop without hesitation. That same day, I got a call from Novaris. "Mr. Ellis, we heard about your decision. We have a different kind of offer. Not to bring you back, but to build something from the ground up. Ethical, secure, with you leading it from day one." It was more than a job. It was a fresh start without ghosts. I accepted the invitation to talk. The next morning, I went to Novaris's headquarters. At the front desk, a man recognized me. "You're Steve Ellis, right?" "I am. My brother works at Orion. He told me what you did." He reached out and shook my hand firm. People like you are hard to come by. It took me a second to answer. People like me learn to do on the outside what we were never allowed to do on the inside. As I walked out, my phone rang. It was Donovan. They're making changes in there, but nothing really feels right without you. I took a deep breath before answering. Some things need to be rebuilt from scratch, and others just need to be left behind. 6 months later, I walked into a newly opened building in North Austin. Glass walls reflecting the clear sky. No signage on the front yet. Inside, the lobby was empty. The rooms still smelled like fresh paint. And at the center of it all, a data center still under construction, my project. From the blueprint to the last screw, Novaris had kept its promise. They gave me freedom, budget, and what Orion never truly offered, quiet respect. My role was new, but the title was familiar. CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Only here, I wasn't seen as a remnant of the past. Here, I was part of a solution that hadn't existed until now. I built my team carefully, brought in 2 names left adrift after Craig's exit. Donovan was the first, then Richard, now heading compliance and internal security. A small team, loyal, technical, no spotlights, no egos, only people who understood the value of a well-built machine and of a truth carefully protected. On my first official day, I received an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. Signed, Mr. Randall, Orion's board. Steve, your departure hurt more than your whistleblowing. Thank you for forcing us to look where we didn't want to. May your new journey be as steady as your integrity always was. I read it once, then filed it away in the back of a drawer. Some memories don't deserve the spotlight just to be remembered. The following week, I was invited to speak at a private enterprise tech event, a panel on ethics and security in times of corporate transition. I was introduced as a special advisor at Novaris and a benchmark in ethical technical restructuring. I stepped on stage, scanned the audience, spoke briefly. Just one sentence. Systems fail when people are treated as disposable extensions of a cost, and companies fail when they forget who held the invisible wires behind the panels. Silence. Then, quiet applause. It wasn't a show. It was a warning. On the way out, a young woman approached me. Mr. Ellis, my father was let go just like you. He never got a chance to defend himself. Hearing your story gave me hope. I smiled, but with the weight of someone who knows exactly what it cost. Today I walk the halls of a building I helped raise from nothing. No one here calls me a relic. They call me by name, and they listen when I speak. And that is more than I ever had before. In my office, morning light streams through the windows. Meetings are focused. People don't glance at my badge to guess my age, they look to see what I know. And you? What would you do if you found out your exit was just to cover someone else's mistake? Would you stay quiet? Or would you quietly build something greater?